Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to another Vic Highland podcast. We've got a different role today. So myself, I'm Chris. I will be interviewing Vic, and he's going to enlighten us on all things to do with guitars. So I'm going to get straight into my first question. So Vic, regarding Bluescamp and bands, and plus your other experience in tutoring people in bands, what do you see in terms of what people get out the most from playing as part of a band, an ensemble, a duo, a trio? What do you see in people's faces when it starts to come together?
Yeah, okay. So I think first of all, the biggest problem with guitar has is the sort of bedroom guitarist thing, and that's always been like that. I mean, if you're playing drums, you got to play with other people, really, haven't you? If you see what I mean. Otherwise, okay, drums fine, but if you're playing a drum kit, really, you do, to get the full experience, you got to play with other people. Same with bass, same with singing. You've got to be at least singing with something, even if it's just with a recording. But with guitar, you can literally just sit in your bedroom and play. So I think when people get the experience of working with other people, that's really where the magic happens. Okay, forget classical guitar. We'll put that to one side. Okay, because that's a different beast altogether. Yeah. But if you're playing electric guitar, everything you learn, more or less, you need other people. You're only part of an ensemble. So when that happens, I think that's where the aha moment kicks in. It's just working with others. Yeah. I don't know whether that's true with keyboards, but I think that's definitely true with guitar.
Okay, and what sort of, in terms of skill sets that are then opened up or needed in terms of playing with other people, what sort of skill sets do you see that people then start to develop? Not only, I mean, in terms of the actual instrument itself and all the other peripheral kind of goings on.
Yeah, well, yeah. What happens is, again, if you're the bedroom guitar player, you have your own sense of timing, and I use that very loosely.
Very elastic.
Yes, very elastic. So as soon as you actually get playing with others, particularly a drummer, if the drum's in time and all the rest of it, which hopefully they are, you have to suddenly get your act together to really, find that sense of timing. And I know it sounds sort of crazy because you think, well, everybody's sort of in time. No, they're not. You've only got to play along with a metronome to realise you're not. You don't naturally play in time until you can feel it. So that's one of the things, and of course you could then sort of go, well, that's on the level of feeling, right? Really, rhythm, but on the level of listening, you have to learn how to listen. And well, you know this when we work with people, who are actually listening, because they're the ones who don't drown everybody else out for a start. They're the ones who are actually playing in time, more or less, and at the right level. It's not even just a case of not drowning people out, but actually being at that level where they're supporting the rest of the sound, but they're not drowning anybody out, and they're not disappearing in the mix there. So all of that happens, and it takes time. That takes time. And people can be quite good technically, but not listening.
Yeah.
at all
Yeah.
to other people.
Yeah. I think we kind of coming on across a common theme from what we spoke about last time, in terms of listening, where it seems to be the most obvious thing with music, and yet you can look at someone who's playing and just see that their ears are shut or turned inside out, and they're just not paying attention to what's the sound that is being made.
Yes.
Right.
I think this goes a long way back, because one of the strange ironies about music in the West is that music has been written down, which is sort of weird, because if you think about it, music's about sound. But suddenly we've transported the thing about it being about what your ears are doing to what your eyes are doing. And that is a strange sort of conundrum, because that's not actually like that in many other musical cultures, particularly when you go back.
Yeah.
Because music wasn't written. So it was all about sound.
Yeah.
So we've already got this misplaced thing about which sense is primary in music.
Yeah.
And even if you learn, and you know this, even if you read and you're a good reader, there comes a point in time when you're playing an instrument when you get to a certain level of playing, and then it literally is about sound. To move from that level of just being able to play to actually become really expressive, it is absolutely about sound and feeling, and not what necessarily is on the page. It's like transporting that thing that's written on the page to something else. Now, with contemporary music, of course, we can actually get straight to that point of what is it that you're actually saying or doing or whatever. And I think that the guitar probably is in a good place with that, because traditionally, it was played by ear.
Yeah.
I still think that's an important aspect. I'm not saying that music reading isn't important. I'm just saying, we've got to put it in its place. And particularly with electric guitar, some of the greatest guitar players couldn't read. They couldn't read music. Yeah.
Okay, so from to people that are watching or just listening, I don't play the guitar at all. So my sort of questions to Vic are very genuine. If I was picking, if I'd had a few lessons and I wanted to play in a band, now I've heard of this magical thing called bar chords. Can you show us how you form bar chords, and then maybe
okay, let's backtrack with this a little bit, because I think first of all, bar chords are really important, but they're actually quite difficult. So the first thing is the first chords you need are what the Americans used to call the campfire chords, or the cowboy chords. If you're a good cowboy, how many chords do you need to know to entertain everybody around the campfire type of idea?
Yeah.
So they're the chords at the bottom. Now, I've already got a load of videos and a course which people can get access to, which covers all of this with all the techniques about how to get the chords down. But just generally speaking, you've got a bunch of major chords. So you've got A, right? And so, as I say, you can get access to this, but just to put this in perspective. So you got A, you got C and D and E, and then G. Now there's a couple of other chords which are bar chords, like F. But of course, what happens here is that you need the chord of E. See the shape?
Yeah.
So once you get the hang of being able to play that shape, the trick with bar chords, going to answer your question, is to form that chord up, but not using the first finger.
Right.
So once you've got the E shape, and then you can move it up one fret, because effectively what you're doing is replacing this, what we call the nut, with your finger, because that means every single note is going up. Now you can't do this on the keyboard.
So is that a little bit like adding a capo as you play?
Yes. So the capo is the same as what your finger's doing. But of course, you can then move. You can move around, but you can't move a capo around.
Yeah.
All right. So you need those open chords to start with.
Yeah.
Because the other one that you need is the A or the A minor, and likewise the E minor, because they are the ones that we will bar. Now, there are others that you could bar, but generally you don't.
Yeah.
So I think the motto for the guitar player really is, what's the simplest way of doing this? Don't make life difficult. Just go the simplest route. And just having E's and A's barred is the simplest route. You don't want to really be barring a C chord.
Yeah.
Or barring a G chord. You can, but it's sort of a bit bonkers.
Yeah.
And you can get, so that gives you, once you've got that pattern, and again, this is covered in this video course, which is 0 to hero guitar, right? The E shape to the A shape is the big change, as you know, going from what we call 1 to 4.
Yeah.
Is the big change in most songs, right? Or the 1 to the 5. Well, once you've got the bars, they're easy because you've got your E. So let's say we're playing, this is the chord key of G now, right?
Yeah.
We have to take my word for it. So at the 3rd fret, we've got a bar of an E shape. So if you want to watch the video, you can see this. Once you get to the A shape, that gives you the 4, and then you go up 2 frets. And then you've got that pattern just going up, so staying. So you can then play in any key, and that would give you that chord move.
Right. Okay. No, I understand. I can see that.
So that's nice and simple.
Yeah.
So
it kind of looks complicated to start with, but then as you see the repeated pattern and the fingers moving to the same position, even though you're moving up the fretboard, it does make sense. Yeah.
Now that does look a lot easier than it actually is, because bar chords are difficult initially, and they are tough. But once you've got them, it's like riding a bike. You're there. Yeah. But backtracking again, once you've got your open chords, because they're obviously the most important thing, goes back to something you said last week about the classic type of chords that you get in the key. So in guitar, if you're playing in a key like G, G's quite okay.
Yeah.
You've got the 1, the G, the 4, which is C, the D, which is 5, and then you've got the 6th chord, your relative minor, which we spoke about, is E minor, and then you've got the 2 chord, which is A minor. Now the only one we're missing is the 3, which is B minor, which is a bar chord. Now there are sort of variations where we abbreviate that, but even so, that's most of the chords, even without the B minor.
Yeah, yeah.
So once you use a capo, you can play those chord shapes with the clamp on there and just change the key. So that's probably the easiest route if you're literally going down the, I've got 4 chords on a join a band, which is, of course, the punk mentality. And, they did a lot.
Okay.
So let me just mention about 5th chords, because this is probably your quickest route in a band. If you take a chord barred, we'll start at the bottom of the guitar. If you took a chord of E and a chord of E minor, the only note that's different is what's sitting on the 3rd string. So if you only play the 3 bass strings, we end up with what we call a 5th chord. In other words, we don't know whether it's major or minor.
Yeah.
And that is the chord which we use in rock guitar all the time, because it sounds nice and angry, right?
Yeah.
So that shape, which you can see there, we can just move it around, and it will cover for any major or any minor. And if you move it across the string, we've got it in A. So you really can get by with just that shape.
Yeah.
So, that's a bit technical, but you get the idea that there is a quick route in. Most of the punk numbers are that. Most of the rock sort of punk, sort of powerful sort of rock numbers use that type of chord. So anything that sounds quite sort of angry is that. And most of the riffy chord sequences are that. So, you could go a long way with just that handful of chords.
That's good to know. So I think anyone who's watching should feel quite comfortable or reassured that if you do want to play in a band, or you're thinking of coming to Bluescamp or getting involved in anything that Vic or the Bluescamp team do, you do not have to be a mega superstar. And what you get out of it happens very, very quickly. Actually, it's not like not a painful process.
And what's nice about the guitar is there are things that make it even easier than that, because obviously we've got the ability to detune and tune to chords, right?
Yeah.
Which means that you could tune the guitar to a chord and just bar it and move it around the guitar. Now, you know, you look at that and you think, oh, that's really cheating. But there are some fantastic songs that do that, you know, tune the guitar up to a chord and just literally just bar. And if you wanted to make it a little bit colorful, you might add another finger to get what we call a suspended chord.
Yeah.
And there's some, you know, a lot of the Rolling Stones songs do things very similar to that.
Yeah.
Now, on the face of that sounds quite a complicated thing. But like a lot of things, once you learn how that's done, it opens the floodgates to things that are possible. So as an example, a lot of Joni Mitchell songs are written in that type of way, where she's used an unusual tuning. So one example of that is Big Yellow Taxi.
Yeah.
So although that's sort of A, D, and E, if you played that as A, D, and E, it wouldn't sound like her playing it. But as soon as you get the tuning, and then you move the fingers around, and then add, because she gets that dagger, and it's just adding a couple of fingers onto the bar as she moves around. And then suddenly you sound like Joni Mitchell's guitar part.
Yeah, yeah.
So slide guitar obviously uses a lot of that. You know, guitar tuned to a chord, because you're playing with a bottle on your finger.
Yeah. That kind of leads in to what I was going to sort of ask next. When you play the piano, you can see what you're doing, which is quite, you know, useful, shall we say. I'm always fascinated with people that play instruments and they can't actually see what their fingers are doing. But if I was to select a guitar sound and put it on the keyboard, especially say acoustic, it's not impossible, but it's really difficult to sound like an acoustic guitar.
Yes.
Because the piano doesn't work like acoustic guitar. The notes are not spaced out in the same particular way. And I was just wondering, and this is to sort of put you on the spot a bit, if you're able to show or demonstrate what the guitar can do, that say the piano doesn't do, or if we did the same thing, how they sound completely different.
Yes.
They're just not the same instrument, are they?
No, they're not. And you really see this when you play pieces of music written by guitarists, because the chord sequences are the type of thing that a piano player would not play. Just in the same way as a piece of music written on the piano or keyboard doesn't fall easily under the guitar. Because you might do things where there's like a chromatic thing going on in the bass that the guitar just cannot, well, if you're a jazz guitar player, you could, but it doesn't fall under the fingers, and it doesn't fall into the mindset of the guitar player.
Yeah. So
one of the classic ones is going back to the business of bar chords. Right. This is a concept of using bar chords with no bar.
Okay.
Okay. So if you're playing in a key of E, obviously a lot of the strings are open strings in the chord, right?
Yeah.
Which means that these open strings are key notes, you know, notes of the key chord in the key of E, or a key where E sounds like the root chord. So modal keys, basically, which would be important for the rock stuff. So if you're playing in E and you moved up to where A is, but didn't bar it, in other words, you didn't do that, you just did this, you've got an A chord, but with a load of E notes in it.
Yeah.
So you've got this exotic sounding A chord. Now this doesn't make sense on the piano because you've got a load of notes that stuck down, pedal notes,
Yeah.
that are all over the place in the bass and sort of somewhere in the middle. And the same with the B. So we get these amazing sounding chords. Now, guitarists like Pete Townsend use that a lot. So he'd play a chord like E, and he'd be like up the middle of the guitar with loads of open strings. And then maybe on the...
Yeah.
And suddenly you've got these big sounding chords on one guitar, which there was only him filling the sound. Now, that is the type of thing that the guitar can do. And it could also transpose key. You know, like you play a riff here, you want to play another key, you just shift the pattern.
Yeah.
And that is such an important thing on guitar.
Yeah.
Where, because the scales look like a pattern and the chords look like a pattern, we just move them and they change key. And again, you can't do that on the keyboard because you do this and you play another key and suddenly you've got all these black notes have appeared and, you know.
Yeah.
So
that is really interesting, and that sort of brings me on to another point in terms of songwriting, is that it's quite, I wouldn't say it's easy, but we can all write songs to our heart's content on our own.
Yeah.
But when you collaborate with someone else and they play a different instrument, there's a whole bunch of different things suddenly, spring up that you didn't know of.
Yes.
Or you just go, that sounds nice. What's that? Well, I'm playing, like you said, I'm just playing the E chord, but it just sounds different on the guitar, and and so on. So perhaps you could tell us a little bit more, because I know you're doing a lot of other songwriting kind of programs at the moment.
Yeah.
How would that fit in, the collaboration type thing, into other things that you're doing?
Okay, so the first of all about collaboration with other people, because there's a very interesting point that you've sort of opened the possibility up to by saying that. A lot of people, when they get their songs, their song ideas are like their little baby, you know, and nobody's allowed to sort of tamper with what they do, if you see what I mean. That is a bad idea. So if you come along with a song, let's say I've got a bunch of chords. I'll use that set or something. Let's say I've got that, right? Standard sort of rock pattern. So E, D, A, maybe back to the D. Okay? Okay, so I've got this idea. If I say to the bass player, okay, I want you to go.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not getting the most out of the bass player. All I'm doing is making this bass player, play like a guitar player. It's not the same thing. Same thing with the keyboard player. I could say, well, here are the chords, and then let the keyboard player run away with it. Just let the keyboard player do what the keyboard player should do. Yeah. In other words, what does that make him think? Because otherwise, the keyboard player is just going to be doing what the guitarist thinks. Well, the guitarist doesn't think like a keyboard player. And where it really kicks in is when you start talking to like brass players, because I have no idea what goes on in the mind of a brass player. Probably something very strange.
Probably nothing to do with music.
Exactly. Probably mostly to do with drinking beer. But I can't, apart from that, in my experience of horn players anyway. But if you say to a horn player, look, I've got this riff idea and it's going to go, here's the, like, da, 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 da. They'd go, very politely, they'd say, yeah, okay, would this be all right? In other words, your idea was really rubbish, but I got just generally what you've got. And they'll come back with something that's 10 times better than my idea, but it's in keeping with my idea. So I think that's the point. It's like understanding that you're coming at a piece of music from your sort of your spectrum of ideas.
Yeah.
And somebody else has got another spectrum of ideas. And if you're playing in a band, that's what you want. You want people to contribute. So, so from that point of view, that's one of the things that I say a lot to people when they're doing the songwriting thing about collaboration. Because often I've got some people there who play piano, I've got people there who sing, somebody else is a bass player, you might have a couple of guitarists, and they've all got their different ideas. So you can generalize and say, look, like we did last week, certain chords fit songs. You could sort of go, there are millions of songs that go with this sort of chord sequence. So whenever somebody comes along and plays that, and you could play it on a keyboard, somebody will come up with a new idea based from the keyboard that would be different from if a guitarist sat down and played that set of chords. Which is like, if you said that to somebody normally, they go, well, how's that? Because the chords are the same. No, it's just not the way they sit on the instrument. And new ideas will come out of it. Just in the same way as somebody just played those bass notes on a bass guitar, it might lead you to a completely different type of song.
Yeah, that's good. And I think also it's not just the pitching. You've got to think in terms of rhythm. So I can't play wah-wah piano.
No.
It just doesn't, no matter how much I try, it doesn't work like that. So you can be very, very rhythmically different depending on what sort of instrument. Yeah, and also drums is the ultimate in that.
Yeah.
And again, to anyone watching or listening, if you come to Bluescamp or you come to France or you get involved in any of the other things that go on, this is what will bring you out of your shell and open you up to a whole bunch of things that you didn't really realize were possible.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that's worth us sort of having a chat about is about soloing, lead playing. And we touched on this last time, I think it was last week actually, with regard to piano and improvising piano. Now on the guitar, I was going to say it's easier. It's easier certainly that you can, once you've learned how to solo, you could pretty much solo in any key. Once you've got like say a pentatonic scale, you could solo in any key just by moving it around. And then once you've learned like another scale, you could move that around. So once you've sort of nailed how to play around that scale shape, that helps. But soloing isn't about scales per se, that's the map. The real trick is to be able to talk through the instrument, and it is literally that, or sing through the instrument. Once you've got that idea, that transforms your playing. And it's actually quite simple, but it's so simple that it's a bit tricky to do. That sounds a bit of a contradiction in terms, because people try to overcomplicate things, right?
Play every note there is possible.
Yes. So what generally happens is this is on the videos, so I will just play it. But this is a pentatonic scale. So we've got this classic pattern, and you can see it literally is where the dots are until you get to the second string. So you can mess around with that. Now, what generally happens is people do this. They're still playing a scale. Yeah. But as soon as you get somebody repeating a note, it starts to sound like a tune. And if you turn around and come back again, it starts to sound more like a tune, right? And if you then have some pauses in there, it sounds like it's phrased. And then the real icing on the cake is say something. Nothing grand. What did you have for breakfast? I had coffee and toast, which I didn't have, but let's, and then got melody. And then you start to copy what the human voice does, that it slurs between notes. You can slide in two notes. Or do little tricks which we call pull-offs. Or bend the string if you get good. And it now starts to sound like you're solo.
Yeah.
And then, you know, little motifs where you get, you know, it starts to sound like Lee. And
Yeah.
it really is that simple. It takes a bit of practice, but it's a simple concept. And once you get the idea that it is a language,
Yeah. That's cool.
everything you hear other people do, it's their way of saying something.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just losing the sound a little bit. I've just gone very quiet this end, and I'm not sure. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you clear as a bell.
Okay. All right. That's cool. That's not a problem. Hopefully it's all still recording well. So as one other thing, whenever we've gigged in the past, you've always, not always, but quite often do the sort of trickery guitar behind the neck thing. Yeah. What's the secret behind that? Does that like sort of take ages to practice, or is there a quick shortcut?
It's not to knock anything over or knock anyone out. Yeah, no, it's actually quite simple. And again, there's a trick to it. There's a trick to everything.
Yeah.
I mean, if I can do it, anybody can. You've got to know where you are to start. And again, because we often play in box patterns, for this you would play in a box pattern. You wouldn't want to play around the guitar because that'd just be ridiculous. And you've also got to be able to hold the guitar. So you can't be doing something fancy because you wouldn't be able to hold it in place. So you grab hold of the guitar and you're in a shape, right, which I was saying, like, you stick with the shape and just put it behind your head. And then you're still in place, right? And you know where you are, because half the time you're not looking anyway, are you? So you can just play from there. It's easy. Okay, I'm playing, you don't normally see jazz guitarists playing with a guitar behind their head, but you know, and I'm playing a jazz guitar. Well, T-Bone Walker did, actually.
Yeah.
And he had a guitar like this. But yeah, it's not difficult.
Okay.
I don't play with my teeth anymore because it damages your teeth. So I used to do that. Well, you know that. You've seen me do it. But But I don't do it.
Have you got any other props nearby? You don't have a
full dentures.
You know, you don't have a bottle or anything like that. You could.
I haven't actually got. Well, actually, I have got one. Yeah, I've got one somewhere. Just bear with me a minute. You'll have to tell them a joke or something. Oh no, don't tell them a joke.
Well, no, I won't say any jokes. I'm one of those people that are just not naturally funny, and I wish I was. But the more I try to be funny, the less funny I am. So there you go. So hopefully Vic will reappear very quickly and save the day in terms of me not trying to be funny.
Yeah.
But there you go.
That wasn't too long, fortunately.
Bang on time.
Yeah, good. Okay, so this is not really the type of thing I normally use. I normally actually use a bottle. So I use like a little medicine bottle that goes on my finger, which is the standard things that the slide players, the blues players particularly, used to use. This is just a bit of metal piping. Originally, when I started playing, I did have an old towel rail, like a bathroom towel rail, which I got as just an end of, you know, you buy it in a hardware store where somebody would just go and buy a certain length of it. And there was an offcut, and I just chopped it up into lots of little bits. So I had several, and they don't break, which is something that glass bottles often do. And the idea is that you just when you play slide, you have to really use your fingers because you've got to damp everything down. if I wasn't damping, that would sound horrible because all the other strings would be ringing. All right, so there's a classic sound, really. But normally, slide players will tune the guitar into a chord. So when you played more than one note, you get a whole chord, and it actually makes it a lot easier to play, a lot easier to pitch. So a lot of the very, very famous slide solos are in different tunings. So as an example, a lot of the bluesmen used to use the guitar tuning to a chord of E or D. The classic sort of E tuning, I think Elmore James and people like that would be tuned to E. But a rock number that's got a classic sort of slide intro is Joe Walsh's Rocky Mountain Way. And that's the guitar tuned to E. And you're basically just going up to the shape, and then when it drops down to a D chord, it drops down there. And it's awesome. It's an awesome sound. But you've got to remember that stuff was done by people who were blind originally, and they weren't actually guitar players, they were beggars because they couldn't pick cotton. I mean, it's literally as straightforward as that. They couldn't pick cotton, so they had to beg. So they tuned a guitar to a chord and sat on a street corner and played and sang. So that's where that style comes from. It's amazing, really, that the style of music comes out of something else other than real, what we'd say, music.
Yeah.
It was begging, really.
Yeah.
But that, again, slide guitar is actually quite tricky to play. But if you get the basics of pitching the note, and because what's weird is that the bit that you see when you're standing up, you're used to always looking at the fret, but when you play slide, you're actually over the fret, so you have to really listen to pitch the notes. And then the note, you can't use the slide sort of crooked, because if you're playing more than one note, one of the notes will be out of tune. So it is a bit of a difficult thing to do. And when you see people who are really good slide players, they've spent a long time doing it, really.
Okay. I just want to sort of go off at a tangent and ask you, would you say doing grades, so having lessons and doing grades, makes you a better player, especially if you're an adult? Do you think that's useful to go and do grades? Because for me, at the moment, it's a bit of a $1 million question.
Yeah. Okay. This is interesting because I examine for guitar. I'm examining people doing grades. A lot of my pupils do grades, but here's my take on it, because you'd expect I wouldn't have a straightforward answer, or it'll be left field, because that's me. Doing grades for grade's sake, no. Actually, doing grades because it's something to aim for, and it's a way of focusing people, yes. Because unfortunately, a lot of the things that we need to do, people wouldn't do, because why, who in their right mind wants to play scales? Who in their right mind wants to learn bunches of arpeggios? People want to sit down and play whatever song it is they like. But the technical benefit of, building the map, of knowing how this stuff works and fits together, because that's what makes a really good musician. And makes it possible for a guitarist to communicate with a keyboard player or a brass player or whatever, being able to go, it's in the key of whatever. It's in the key of A. An understanding, if you're working with a harmonica player, that doesn't mean anything to him until you understand he's playing a fourth above you. And understanding the horn players are playing in B flat or E flat. Yeah. And just understanding that, all of that stuff, you would not understand that without doing the structural work. And I have not, unless you find somebody who just is desperate to become the next best thing.
Mm.
For most people, they wouldn't know that, but they wouldn't learn that stuff without doing grades.
Yeah. No, I think that's a very good and succinct answer, because I know it's a big debate amongst people. I just want to learn how to play. I don't want to have to do my, these exams. I just want to play what I want to play.
Yeah.
And it is an argument I have with people a lot of the time. And as you say, I completely agree that you're not doing it for the grades. You're not doing it for that certificate necessarily.
No.
Maybe if you're really young and still at school, that looks good on the wall. But when you're older, you're not.
Well, the thing that I often say to people, it's not the piece of paper. That's the point. It's the journey.
Mm.
It's getting ready to do that exam. But you wouldn't do the getting ready unless the exam was there.
Yeah.
You see, and I've often had people, for some reason, life gets in the way just before the exam, but they've done the work. And as far as I'm concerned, that's fine. They've done the exam as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
Because they've been motivated to do the work. I mean, it takes a certain type of person who wants to learn scales. I was one of them.
Yeah.
There's something there's got to be something wrong with you to want to do that, because it's not fun.
Yeah.
You've got to have that sort of devotion to the instrument. And sometimes that devotion comes, but only after you've got a certain way along the path, and that often requires some grades. And the other thing is that going into a room and playing to somebody you've never met is another hurdle that you have to get over before you can play in public anyway.
Yeah.
So there are a few things that grades do actually do for you that's actually not the grade.
Yeah.
It's not what people sort of think about as the grade. So that's how I see it. And if people really enjoy playing and really getting something out of it, but they don't want to do grades, fine. That's okay. But it just depends. Different people need different motivators.
Okay.
So that's my sort of take on it. Yeah. So
okay. Well, that was kind of my final sort of question for this session. Have you got any other words of wisdoms in terms of guitar playing, choice of guitar, amps, all the other bits and pieces?
Yeah, that's a very good point. Obviously, in an ideal world, it's nice to have a good playable guitar. It doesn't have to be expensive. But again, the problem with this, until you play guitar, you don't really know what you're looking for. So there's a little bit of a sort of chicken and egg thing here. But once you get playing and you get used to what a good guitar feels like, when it's been set up properly, so that the action, the height of the strings is right and all the rest of it. If you look around for secondhand guitars that are well built, and they don't have to be Fenders and whatever, but they, you can pick them up. But something like Squier guitars, Ibanez guitars, some of the old names that are sort of quite, like Aria and stuff like that.
Mm.
You can pick up guitars really cheaply. And if you know somebody who can set them up, you can get a really good, playable guitar for not an awful lot of money. And then with regard to amps, obviously, ideally, and there are a lot of really nice amps about now. I mean, first of all, the bass amps, when they started producing the small bass amps like the Mark amps and stuff, they were just astonishing sound. You didn't need a massive cabinet or anything like that anymore.
Yeah.
Well, there's some good little amps like that now. I've seen a lot of these Spark amps, and they're terrific. But I still think a little valve amp. I use a Fender Blues Junior. I've got several of them because I have. But I think they always sound great. Good valve amps sound terrific. So yeah, they're the sort of things. But a decent practice amp, you can go a long way. It's only really when you start playing along with drummers and you have a transistor amp, and then your guitar starts to sound like a demented wasp instead of it being like that big sound that you want to get. And you can't really get that. You can get that with a valve amp. It doesn't matter what frequencies the drummer is obliterating. Your amp's going to be able to punch through it, because that's the thing, really.
Yeah.
So that's my thing. And just pedals, don't need a massive amount of pedals. An overdrive pedal, because that works well to sort of change your volume as well.
Mm-hmm.
Wah-wahs are nice, and maybe some sort of delay thing that gives it a little bit of spacey sound, and that's it. Yeah. I've used all sorts of things in the past, but it's horses for courses, really. But again, you can pick a lot of those things up secondhand. So I think hunt round for secondhand gear, and don't impulse buy. So that's it, really.
Okay.
My word.
Good. Well, thanks a lot, Vic, for chatting.
Thanks for doing that, Chris.
That's all right. We can do it the other way around. And from a non-guitarist sort of point of view, I would say to everybody listening, watching, come along to Bluescamp, and everything that we've covered, from songwriting, what guitar you use, playing your guitar behind your neck, bar chords, other chords, solos, all that sort of stuff, that is what goes on during that time. Yeah.
Just one other little thing we should have said with guitar, which is particularly important, I think. It might be a good idea when you're doing some practice to practice standing up, wearing a strap, and watch yourself in the mirror. Because that's one of the things when you start performing, suddenly it's like if you spend a lot of time sitting down playing, you have to sort of learn how to move around. So that's something that's quite good to practice. It gives you that feeling, being more like a rock god.
Yeah. Which is what it's all about, to be honest.
It's totally what it's all about. I wouldn't have learnt the guitar if I didn't think that was the case. But, good. Anyway, that's great. Thanks, Chris. Okay. We'll speak again soon. Yes, undoubtedly we shall.